All right, let's dive into a leader who has, without a doubt, shaped our modern world, Vladimir Putin. For more than 2 decades, he's been one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, polarizing figures out there. And to really get a handle on the headlines, you've got to understand the man behind them.
I mean, think about it. Since the year 2000, Putin has been the gravitational center of Russian power. His leadership has defined a whole era, completely rewriting the rules for his country's politics, its economy, and its role in the world.
We all see that carefully crafted public persona, right? But to really understand why he does what he does, we need to peel back the layers. We need to look at what forged his worldview, the system he built from the ground up, and the vision he has for Russia's future.
And that story, believe it or not, doesn't start in the grand halls of the Kremlin. Nope. It begins in the ashes of World War II, right in the heart of the Soviet Union.
So he was born back in 1952 in a city called Leningrad. We know it as St. Petersburg today. His childhood was tough. The city was still reeling from a devastating wartime siege. That kind of environment, well, it teaches you discipline and a certain kind of patriotism. After law school, his career path was clear. He joined the KGB, the Soviet Union's powerful intelligence agency, and he spent some really critical years as an officer in East Germany, right on the front lines of the Cold War. That career in the KGB, it wasn't just a job. It forged what you could call an intelligence mindset. It's a way of looking at the world that prizes secrecy, strategic moves, and above all else, the absolute security of the state. And that mindset, it didn't stay in East Germany. It followed him all the way to the top.
So you have this mindset. How does that translate into action? Well, when Putin came to power in the late 90s, Russia was, frankly, a mess. So his first order of business was to build a whole new system of control.
And this is where we get to the two very different stories about his rule. He created a strong, top-down government. On one hand, his supporters will tell you this was absolutely crucial. It pulled the country back from chaos and brought back stability. But on the other hand, critics say it came at a huge price. It weakened democratic institutions and basically pushed any real political competition to the sideline.
So how did he actually do it? Well, you can really break it down into 4 pillars. He surrounded himself with a tight-knit, loyal inner circle, a lot of them guys from the security world. He cut a deal with the powerful oligarchs. You can keep your wealth, but your political loyalty belongs to me. He also tightened his influence over the courts, which led to concerns about selective justice, where the law seems to come down harder on your political opponents. And of course, a huge one, taking greater control over the media, which allowed him to shape the national story.
You take that system and you add some major constitutional changes, especially one in 2020 that basically hit the reset button on his presidential terms. Well, that's how he's managed to stay in charge for over 20 years. And again, you see those two different perspectives. For some, it's stability. For others, it's a move away from democracy.
Okay, so we've seen how he built this massive structure of power. But why? What was it all for? That brings us to his vision for Russia itself. At its heart, his vision really rests on 3 main ideas. First, get the economy back on its feet, mostly by using Russia's massive oil and gas reserves. Second, restore a sense of national pride, history, and cultural unity. And third, promote traditional conservative social values, often positioning them as an alternative to what's happening in the West.
And, economically, in his first years, there was a huge turnaround. Global energy prices were sky high, and that money fueled a recovery. Poverty went down, salaries went up, and the government's bank account was suddenly stable. This economic success was a huge part of his early popularity.
With Russia on more solid ground at home, Putin then turned his attention outward. His goal? To put Russia back on the map as a major global player.
The core idea that drives his foreign policy is this concept of a multipolar world. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's a direct challenge to the idea that just one country gets to call all the shots. In this vision, global power is shared between several major powers, and Russia is, of course, one of them.
So what's the game plan? First, make sure Russia is seen as a major global power again. That's backed up by a huge emphasis on national sovereignty, basically the idea that no one gets to tell Russia how to run its own affairs. To make that stick, he poured resources into rebuilding the military and used Russia's energy exports as a key tool of foreign policy.
Now, as you can probably guess, this approach has put Russia on a collision course with the West. Arguments over NATO expansion, sanctions, and spheres of influence have made relations incredibly tense. And this fundamental clash of worldviews is a central reason for the devastating conflict involving Ukraine. So, after all this time, more than 20 years, we're left with a legacy that's just as massive as it is controversial.
This quote really just hits the nail on the head. To his supporters, he's the guy who saved Russia from collapse, who gave it back its strength and its voice. To his critics, he's the leader who rolled back freedoms and put the country on an authoritarian path. But here's the bottom line. No matter where you stand on that debate, one thing is just not up for argument. Vladimir Putin's impact has been immense. He has truly, fundamentally shaped the 21st century, not just for Russia, but for the whole world.
And that leaves us with the big question of his legacy, doesn't it? Will history see him as the man who restored a nation's strength, or as the architect of a new age of global division? The answer to that is something people are going to be debating for a long, long time. Thanks for watching.